Coming to you today with a discussion of Frontline D-Day, which is a DVG World War II tactical infantry combat card game. As you can hear, I'm also coming to you with some pretty bad allergies. At least I think they're allergies, so I apologize for that in advance, but with limited filming time, I have to sort of move forward and hope it works out. This game is something that wasn't really on my radar. I feel it came out when I wasn't really gaming very much, and in 2010 at all. And I think it dropped off the radar pretty quickly, at least it seems that way to me. Maybe DVG put their efforts into Warfighter, which is another tactical infantry card game. They recently brought out the World War II edition. The original, more contemporary edition existed earlier than that, and some of the mechanics are similar. I'm not going to be doing a comparison. I play a lot of Warfighter and really enjoy it. This game came to me in a trade. I really wasn't even aware of it, honestly, till it was offered for trade, and I looked into it, and it had a built-in solo mode, and it looked like a light, war-themed game that I would enjoy, and indeed, that is what it is. I would say that the theming here is definitely light. Here we're looking at some of the art on the cards from the back of the box, and the box itself proclaims June 6, 1944, the battle for Europe begins. There are many scenarios in this game. They are historical, and in fact the first one is, as you would expect, the Pegasus Bridge scenario. We're not going to be looking at that today, but as one example of why I say the theme is rather light, in this particular scenario, the bridge itself, that was my cat, the bridge itself is represented not even by a bridge, it's represented by a stream card because there is no bridge terrain in the game, and you do not, for example, get to use any gliders coming in, which is a big part of the setup and scenario there, historically speaking. So, you know, it's, as you'll see when we get to my play here, it is a very light theme. If you're looking for something truly historical, or a true war game even for that matter, this is not the game for you. I'm going to be showing you, I'm playing here this scenario, Fort du Roule, and really honestly I chose it because it was only 5 turns long, and I will take you to it now. I'm in the middle of turn 1. I'm going to be showing you how the solo version works and totally playing US solitaire rules here in terms of the victory condition. So I've got this game totally spread out on my desk here, and it's taking up the whole desk. I'm not laying it out the way they are suggesting to play because I found that to be visually, let's say, disturbing or confusing. The top cards here that hopefully you can see despite the glare represent the terrain cards, and all of this is dictated by the scenario setup. So you're beginning in scattered trees, your men and units are underneath the terrain card, and the units in one column represent one section. So these two men are in one section, this infantry gun is its own section. Ditto, this is one other section, And so I've got 3 sections going here. We begin in scattered trees, and we have moved from the undergrowth where we were to a stream. And these men are in undergrowth, and we're moving along here. I have the player aid card in the middle of my terrain to denote the fact that our scenario is having us try to occupy this town, and the town is represented by these 3 burnt out buildings cards that are here where the Germans are currently hiding out, and they've got their largest team here that has that's attacking us right now, which we'll get to. So they've got their teams, and they've got an infantry gun hiding out here in the back. The game is played with a hand of cards, and my cards here, again, I'm playing solo, so My cards here are laid out in front of me. I've already played one card earlier in the game that I played as a move card. This is my discard pile. The action cards are drawn into your hand at various turns in the game and will give you various actions. They can be used as a generic move action, as a generic attack action, or they can be used to give you specific advantages, such as attacking with additional firepower or moving and prohibiting the opposing player from moving. One of the things in this game that is very useful for the solo player is the fact that this player aid card delineates for you the options for the solo player when you make a move, and for that matter, your options when they make a move. So, for example, when you attack, when anyone attacks, the other person has three options of what they can do. They can move, they can counterattack, which is typically an attack at a reduced firepower rate unless they have a card that will boost them up, or they can prepare, which is in effect to rearm themselves or gain more cards or something of that nature. If you are moving, these are the options that the other player can do, and if you are preparing, this is what the other player can do. This is very helpful, and it works both ways. So we're going to dip in here and see we're in the middle of the German player's turn, and their actions have been initially determined by this solitaire card draw that they pulled. And the cards are divided into sections. I have to say, visually, it's a little confusing because of the graphic design here, I think, is confusing, the way it delineates what's going on. But in any event, the top portion of this card is a general instruction for the AI to do. In this case, the smallest section of the Germans would get 4 cover in this turn until they were able to prepare. Now, this did not come into play because they were not under attack. This is some general instructions in terms of removing. Pins are part of the wound and damage course of events that we'll get to. Flanking removal has to do with benefits that you have gotten from previous moves, and reload is obvious. So these are things that initially the AI would get to do in their turn. The second portion of the card, highest VP in this case, is referring to which of the sections of the Germans is going to be acting during this turn, and the various cards will give various victory points. So here you see this guy's worth 2 and this guy's worth 1. So in this case, to determine which of the AI sections would be acting, you would add up the victory points and act with the group that had the most. In the case here, it is this section right here. And then the card tells you, well, what are they going to do? How are they going to act? And who are they going to act upon? So in this case, they're going to be acting upon whoever is closest to them, whatever of my sections is closest to them. And they're going to be giving different ranges of distance, and based on the range of distance, how they're going to act. So had the Americans been between 4 and 8 terrain cards away, the Germans simply would have advanced. Unfortunately, at the beginning of this turn they were. Unfortunately, on my turn prior to this draw, I moved. So now I moved into within 3. So I am going to now be attacked by the highest victory point section of the Germans. They're going to get a +2 firepower on their attack, and they're going to be using their rapid fire when they attack, and I will explain what that means in a minute. Just pulling back here to show you again, they are here, and so to determine the distance, you don't count where they are, but you count the empty terrain cards in between until you find an occupied one. So you can see here 1, 2, and I just moved into this terrain here, this undergrowth where I am hiding 3 away. So I'm going to be subject to attack by them, and as I said, they will get the modifications and additions that are designated by this card. One more thing to point out on this card, which kind of stinks for us, this asterisk here. Do not flip acted counter to its acted side. Section can act again this player turn. So typically, after this section right here conducted their assault, I would be flipping this to the acted side, and that would be it for the turn. But due to this special condition, they're going to be able to act again. So how do we see what firepower they're generating, and what does that mean? The rapid fire, 1 unit to use rapid fire, is going to be designated, it's the highest victory point unit, which in this case is this fellow right here. And we can see, let me just pull in a little closer on a different card. Your fire values are determined by the range, which is here at the top column, and your basic fire value, firepower, is in black. Rapid fire usage is in red. When you use rapid fire, if you use rapid fire, you get the higher value, but you must discard your ammo token here, and you cannot reuse any rapid fire until you reload that ammo, and the options for reloading come during the prepare turn of the prepare phase of a turn. So in this case, what we're going to do is our Hamel here is going to be the one conducting the rapid fire, and he is, let's see, he's 3 away, so that gives him a firepower value of 12, and we need to remove this token, which he will get back. And then we simply add up the firepower that we get based on the range. So we have 6 and 12 is 18, with another 8, that's 26 from Gutman, 26. We get another 10 from Ebert, that's 36. No, I'm miscounting. Obviously, somebody possibly caught that. Let me start over. Only 1 rapid firepower is in effect here. So, we are getting a firepower of 4 plus the 12 from Hamel, that is 16, plus the Gutman's 6, that's 22, plus 8 from Ebert, that brings us to 30, plus 2 from Brower, that's 32, plus we remember we got an additional 2. So we're at 34 firepower, and the way this gets designated here is on this player aid card, we move the firepower token to 32. And the next thing we do is we determine what type of response we are able to, how we return fire. Now, typically when you are returning fire, you are returning fire at half the value of your firepower. So I would be adding up everything I have here and dividing it in 2, and that would be my return fire. However, I do have this card that I could choose to use, covering fire, and it says section counterattacks with full firepower. So I may opt to use this card. It's early in the game, but I know there are more cards than just this one in the deck. Maybe I'll draw another one. I'm happy I have it. So let me tally up where I am here without using that card, and we'll see what we have. Well, of course, my basic math was wrong, and if you knew me, you would not be surprised at that. We actually need to absorb 34 firepower, not 32. So I moved this to account for that. We need to absorb this 34 firepower. Now, fighting back without using the card, we have a total of 26 return fire divided by 2. So we would only be returning 13, which would leave us a total of 21 firepower to absorb in various wounds and such. And I don't think we want to do that, but before we get there, let me show you how the wounds and damage works. What you do is you have this cup full of counters, and that is a wound counter. There are morale counters, there's a pin counter, there is a death counter here, which, as you can imagine, just means you're dead. And what you need to do is you need to pull the number of counters, the value on these counters. You have 3 numbers here, and these numbers correspond to the various cover in the terrain that you are. So we are in medium terrain right now. There's, you can see the designation here, medium terrain cover in this undergrowth. Had we been in the stream, we would be under light terrain cover, and these fellows here in the scatter trees are under heavy cover. But we're in medium cover, which means that when we tally up the number of damage values we get, we're using the middle number. So we need to continue to pull chits until we get to the amount of damage that we are meant to take. In this case, if we do not use this card we have to give us the benefit, we need to absorb 21 points of damage, which is going to be quite a lot, and then distribute it in the various ways. So I'm probably going to use that card, and if I use that card, then what that means is we can return fire fully, and we only need to absorb 8 points of damage. So let me put this back, pull out the 8, and show you how they're distributed. We're really lucky we had that covering fire card, because absorbing 8 here early on is pretty rough anyway. This is what I drew. I drew 2 morale chits and a pin. And remember, we're looking at the value here in the middle because of the fact that we are in medium cover, so we're getting a little bit of a benefit there. You pull the values until you get to the number that you need to get to. In this case, it was 8. Had I pulled a card or a counter that brought me over that value, I would just toss it back and have to deal with what I had. But as it is, I pulled right to the 8, and these are 6 morale hits I need to absorb, and this pin. The morale number is indicated here on a card, so this fellow, our leader, has the highest morale at 3, at 2, and the card you can't see has a value of 1. Overall, they only have 6 morale, so they're all going to be at maximum capacity for absorbing morale, which represents the stress that they're under, and once they get to 0, they can't advance. So I'm going to need to deal with that somehow in the prepare phase of my turn if I can, but I don't actually know that I can. I need to check on that. I know that in the prepare phase I can remove some pin values, so somebody's going to get this pin, and with a pin they can't act at all. And that is going to be able to be taken care of in the prepare phase. I'm not sure about the morale, I need to check. As long as they are at the maximum of morale hits that they can take, the next time they get any type of morale hit, it turns into a wound. And once you accrue a certain number of wounds, I think it's 3, then you're dead. So it's important for me to deal with this morale. I need to refer back to the rules to see how I can do that. I will place the counters here to indicate the very bad result of the heavy fire I came under early on in the game. You can see I've placed these markers 3, 2, and 1, and I've put the pin marker on Martinez because he's my weakest guy. So having done that, this is not a great beginning to this game, I must say, for us, because we've got a lot of issues with morale here. We are looking to pull some action card that's going to let us rally and get some of these morale markers off, but right now we don't have that. So what happens next is, now normally this section would have turned its not acted marker to the acted side, but you recall this special effect, they don't have to count that as an action, so they can act again. To act, they pull the next card, and the top part, the general instructions, are what happens first. What do we have? Player must select and discard 1 action card. That's us. Player here is us. So, asterisk. If player has more than 1 action card, which we do, expend 1 equipment to force player to select and discard a 2nd action card. Great. Well, actually, okay, per this scenario, the little backpack sign on each card, here's a 0, so this guy has no extra equipment. This is a 1, that would be extra equipment, but per the scenario, because they've been dug in for a while, none of them have. We were meant to treat everybody as having no equipment, so that's great, because we only have to discard 1 action card. I will show you, before we do that, a little bit about what the equipment is. So, for example, this fellow has, where is his 2nd equipment? Okay, I have to figure that out. In any event, he's meant to be having two pieces of equipment. Something probably got scattered. He's got binoculars here as one of his options, and the binoculars will allow you to take the top discarded action card and discard one of your own. So in a sense, maybe looking ahead or looking behind, as it were, and pulling back a discarded card. This could come in handy if and when we pull a rally card that is going to allow us to remove some of these morale markers, because once we discard it, we'll want to get it again. So he's got those binoculars. This is a hand grenade. It works only range 0 to 1, and it gives a 20 firepower rating, and once you use it, it is gone. This right here is a shovel, and this will allow you to gain 5 cover. We haven't really talked about cover, but cover happens when you are figuring out the firepower, moving back here to this table. When you're calculating the firepower differential, if you take cover, you can reduce that. So for example, I could have used this shovel in this scenario to remove 5 of those 8 damages that we suffered, and perhaps I should have actually done that because we suffered a lot here early on. So we could have dug for cover and only had to absorb 3. I didn't do that for whatever reason, and such as it goes. We have a, what are they calling it? It's a medic kit, obviously. Bandages, they're calling it. And this will allow us to discard a soldier, a 1 wound per soldier. And let's see, that's what we're carrying. Oh, one more piece of equipment I can show you. We have a rifle grenade here, and only somebody with a rifle can have it. It has a range of 2 to 3 and 14 firepower. That covers the additional equipment. So in any case, they have none. We're forced to discard a card, and we're going to look at our hand right here, and I'll just walk you through what I'm thinking about. This gives us an additional attack modification, 2 of them. We have 2 of those. I was interested in this card where we can move, and they cannot react. I'm very interested in keeping this card. And here we get cover when we move until the end of our turn. That's pretty good. 10 cover is pretty good. And were we to come under heavy fire again, that would be useful. Let me give it some thought and come back. Though I've been really interested in this card, this obscured card, which allows us to move and have no reaction from the other side. Remember, when we move, back to this chart here, they can move, attack, prepare, or counterattack. They can do lots of different things. So this card is very useful, but you know what? I'm going to toss this card because I want the additional firepower for the attack, and I definitely need the cover. I don't know. I'm discarding that card. Maybe it was the right decision, maybe not, but that's what I've decided to do. So moving back here, we now, for the, that was the general instruction. The next section on the card dictates who is going to be taking this action now, and it is going to be the farthest unit away, and this would be the infantry gun, which is the furthest away. Again, by farthest away, they mean the terrain here. I'll say there's a little bit of ambiguity in some of the rules I was reading as to whether you scroll through these cards, but I'm playing it that we're going to just move down this card until we take one action and then continue on. So our farthest unit has not yet acted, and he is going to be acting on the most pinned unit. And moving over here, we remember that our Martinez here is the only one actually who's pinned at all. So a most pinned section is this section here, and we need to determine the range, the distance, to see exactly what happens. So not counting where we are, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, we are 5 away. And we will move back here, and we will note that we are going to advance that infantry gun by 1 terrain card, and I need to confirm with the scenario that I'm allowed to do that. I am able to move that unit, and I'm going to. I got a little confused because I think there's some scenarios. I was reading through all of them, trying to figure out which one to show you, and there's definitely one where you're prohibited from moving that particular unit under circumstances. But this is a good opportunity to just show you a little more detail how the scenarios are set up. They're really very clear in terms of the parameters and the constraints and things of this nature. So it is giving you, a couple sentences of historical background about what's going on, who the US units and German units are. There's also British units, by the way, in this game. They have their own cards, but I'm not playing with them. And we know all about the terrain cards. The special rules here, you'll note when we look back at the board that each German soldier does have a morale hit at the beginning, because what we're trying to do, and the aforementioned equipment rating of 0, what we're trying to do here is model that the German units are exhausted from weeks of battle and lack supplies. So that is the special rule. And again, just scrolling down, telling you what units there are, and back to our victory condition for playing US Solitaire, which is the holding, occupying that terrain card 7, which is the card immediately to the right of my player aid card on the map. So we can move that unit. We're going to do that and continue on. So this, by the way, is that terrain card 7, this burned out building here. I've got them sort of turned around, but this is what we need to occupy in order to fulfill our victory condition by the end of turn 5. And here we are with the infantry gun that we are going to be able to advance, and that means advancing into the next terrain here. And there is a special condition on the burned out buildings. Sections cannot advance into or out of this card during the opposing player's turn. Well, this is our turn, our meaning the AI, so we are allowed to do that. We'll move our marker with us and we'll indicate it on the acted side of things. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning of the video that I did not set up this game, as I pull back here again to show you it's taking up my desk, the way they do. What they do is they want you to place the terrain cards in a vertical manner and have your units and men laid out and basically move the terrain cards to indicate on what terrain you are, as opposed to moving the units and the men across the terrain. I found that confusing because it was hard for me to remember, even if I saw a terrain card 2 and a terrain card 5, if they were right next to each other, if the men were still right next to each other, I didn't get a visual sense of what was going on. Whereas here I can clearly see, we're slowly advancing, we need to slowly advance, and of course we need to ultimately occupy this area to win. But doing that really results in a pretty big footprint, but it makes the game work for me. So we're done now with the action here, and I noticed this had gotten flipped over. These two sections have not yet acted. Remember, they did act, but because of the special thing on their card, they didn't have to count it as an action. So what we were going to do, and I'm going to skip over because the video is already getting pretty long, but simply the next thing we do is we pull this solitaire card, and we start going through it again. We're reading the general instructions. What we get to do is to remove 2 morale and 2 wound hits from the opposing forces. That's good for us because we are the opposing forces in this scenario. Fantastic. And we are, dealing with looking at our least wounded section, which are all equal because we don't have any wounds, we just have morale. So I would bring out a D6 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to figure out who that's going to be, and we're either advancing or attacking, but we do get a little benefit here, so that's terrific, and we will take care of that, and I think I'll just then give some general thoughts about the game. Before I close it out here with some thoughts, I want to show you a little bit more of the action card deck, which you didn't get to see too many of these, because at heart, this is a card game. It's a card game with a war theme, and hand management and the use of your cards, and whether you're going to retain a card for later use for its specific abilities, or use a card to for a basic ability, for example, to let you move, which you can do. Those are the types of decisions that are present in the game, and if you like that sort of thing, this is probably a game you'll like. Let me just show you a couple of the examples of the specific cards. Here's a fallback card. It's an instant, meaning you could use it at any time. It says here, play at any time, and it allows you to retreat. And you will also get some cover, additional cover, until the end of the acting player's turn. So if you're under heavy fire, perhaps, you might want to pull this out and pull back. We could see in the AI cards how the range can impact what they do. So even pulling back a little bit could help you out in terms of what the AI is going to do. We have pretty much the opposite of that. Here's an attack card, pour it on, and this is basically going to bump up your firepower. So you're going to get an additional firepower based on the range that you are, so you can use that as an attack card. We've seen this before, a +6 one. Double time, this lets us advance or retreat 2 terrain cards. Typically a move is 1 terrain card, so here you're going to get going a little bit faster in either direction. Rally, I talked about this, needing to pull one of these cards to get rid of my morale, although as I said, we just encountered a friendly benefit from the solitaire card where got rid of a couple of morale points that way, but this is really what you're looking for to get rid of that. We get hit the dirt. Here's some more additional cover. We saw this already in Use Covering Fire, where we get to attack with full firepower as opposed to half firepower. Here's some more pouring on. And there's a limited number of cards, obviously, they're repeated. And here we go, Key Location. Play when a section moves into or within terrain cards 4, 5, or 6. Draw 1 card at the start of each player turn. Discard if this section moves or has all soldiers pinned or wounded. Limit 1 in play. So what this is saying, the scenario, the terrain cards go from 1 to 9 for every scenario. What is varied is what the actual terrain is, but it's 9 spaces and your original setup is, but varied. But again, 4, 5, and 6 is going to be sort of in every scenario pretty much the center of the action, and that's what this card is meant to reflect. Again, here's a different fallback card where you can fall back and get some cover. I don't know if I've shown you them all. I know I haven't because there's a flanking card. Here's another cover card. There's a flanking card somewhere here that gives you some benefits and stays in play until the opposite, I guess there aren't too many of them, until the opposite side does something. Well, I won't continue to look for it. In any event, this action card deck is pretty much key to how the game works. This is Frontline. It's a card game. It's a card game with a war theme, and it certainly is it's a World War II theme. Again, loosely, I think, pretty light. In theme, if you are somebody who absolutely doesn't want to play a World War II game, I suppose you wouldn't want this game, but if you're somebody who kind of doesn't want to play a World War II game, I think you can safely buy this game and not really feel like you're doing that. Of course, the Germans are going to be in every scenario. In some cases, you'll be playing the Brits. In some cases, you'll be playing the US. There's a fair amount of decision-making in the game. I tried to show you some of how it plays out. It's not particularly heavy. If you're used to heavy games and you are a war gamer, for example, or used to playing heavy games, I wouldn't say this is a brain burner, but there is enough going on in terms of deterministic decision making. I think that at least I have not felt completely sideswiped by something totally random. Of course, there are cards, so you could get, I think, perhaps quote-unquote a bad card draw, but the action cards all let you do things, just as we page through here and see the pretty typical DVG rule book, which it's all right. It's a little bit disorganized in some places, but I didn't find it too bad. Here are the terrain cards and some examples of, this is their suggested layout, by the way, and you're meant to pull them down and move them to your sections, and that just did not work for me at all. There's description of what the terrain cards are. Overall, I think the game is out of print. I got it in a trade, and I've seen it, pretty reasonably priced. So if anything in this video it appeals to you, I think it's worth seeking out. The solitaire play, I think, is great. It's easy to implement. I showed you how the cards work, and you don't spend a lot of time trying to go through something mechanistic. You just pull the card, read down it, and during your action you do the same thing. It's very easy and varied enough so that it seems as if the reaction is coming from a live player. I have not played this with another live player, but I actually think it would play quite nicely and pretty quickly. The shorter scenarios are 5 turns, and there are scenarios that are an unlimited turn duration where you're just trying to achieve an objective, and there are a few scenarios that are 6 and 10 turns, so there's some variety available there. And that's pretty much what I got. Frontline, D-Day, DVG Games, the World War II Tactical Infantry Combat Card Game. I liked it.